I will. Okay. So welcome to everyone to our event on energy security, the view from post-Brexit UK. And tonight we are very pleased to have with us Vicky Pryce and Dr. Mohammed as well. We are going to discuss energy security. So Vicky Pryce will be our guest. She has been a member of various committees, and she was working in the banking and oil industry as well. And she is one of Britain's top economists. She also wrote a number of books, very interesting books. Just to mention a few of them, Women versus Capitalism and Is the Economy Stupid? You will probably have the chance to say a few words about these books later on. And tonight we are also very excited because it's our first joint event between ITSS Verona and the Hume Institute. And for this reason, we have Dr. Mohammed Abdel-Haq with us. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. If I'm not, you can correct me. And Dr. Mohammed is a professor of Islamic finance at Bolton University. Welcome, Mohammed. And so we will leave the floor before you have the chance to talk and express your opinions and comments. We will leave the floor to Elena. Elena is one of the members of ITSS, and she's in the energy security team. And she will just have a very brief introduction on what energy security actually is, tonight's topic. So what it is and why is it important, why we should study it, and what's the perception of energy security in Europe. So Elena, if you want to just have a couple of words before we leave the floor to Vicky and Mohammed, I will share the screen.
Exactly, because we have the PowerPoint.
We have a PowerPoint. Okay.
Thank you.
Slideshow. Here we are.
Perfect. So first of all, I would just like to give a shout out to Riccardo, Miguel, and Michele, who also worked on the PowerPoint, just to make sure. So energy security, the view from post-Brexit UK. In the first slide, so on the next one, we have several definitions of energy security. To me, the one that speaks the most is the one from Exxon and Darton, which is that define energy security as the physical availability and accessibility of supply resources, economic affordability, long-term environmental sustainability. In particular, I think that the accessibility of supply resources is the core of energy security, because we see now with the crisis with Russia that when it comes to sanctions, and in particular the inclusion of gas in the sanction, it's the issue is the lack of accessibility to resources such as gas in Europe, and so we have to import it, of course. So I think this is the one that is most poignant out of all the definitions. And in the next slide, we focus more on what energy security means for Europe, and we have a bunch of different topics. So in Europe, we have the need to secure gas supply, we have the need to diversifying gas supply, but most of all, we have also the need to ensure energy security, also in times such as this one, as the one of the crisis with Russia, but also in times of crisis like the pandemic. So we're living in an historical moment where energy security is at stake for several reasons: pandemics, international crisis. In the next slide, we also have another reason why, I think it's the previous slide. Wait a second.
I will go back.
Yeah, it's the one. We have another reason why energy security is at stake right now, which is the environmental crisis. So of course, given the change in seasons, colder winters as well, it has been more challenging for the EU and European countries to ensure energy resources. So we see that there are a lot of challenges, and for this reason, with my team, we have decided to, then the next slide, in the next slide, to divide the challenges into different groups. So we have both internal and external challenges. So internal challenges, so in my own opinion, are probably secondary, but still they're present, are related to European integration. That is a very long historical process, and is still on its way. So also when it comes to establishing common European energy market, we still have regional differences, and it still needs to be more cohesive. So this is a challenge that we're facing internally in the EU. Instead, in the next slide, we see the external challenges that relate to issues that we mentioned before, such as the environmental crisis, the pandemics, the current crisis with Russia, because the main issue of the EU and the European countries is the strong dependency. But another issue that maybe is less highlighted usually is also the limited competences that the EU has. In particular, so the Treaty of Lisbon at the Article 4.1 establishes the energy sector as a shared competence of the states. There is still a lack of political willingness to act in such sense. And so this paired up with a very complex historical period, and with the fact that we depend on the import of energy, is creating the energy crisis that we're living now, and that Vicky Pryce is going to explain to us. If you want to know more, there are some references in the last slide, so feel free to check them out. Oh, and also, I just want to remind you that if you want to know more about the what I mentioned, the gas, so the Nord Stream 2 gas related to the sanctions, we had done with my team a very nice podcast with Gonzalo Pozo Martin on that specific topic. So just in case.
Okay, thank you very much, Elena. That was a very good introduction. And I will now leave the floor to Mohammed. Mohammed, once again, thank you so much for being with us. A very warm welcome to you. Would you like to add something regarding?
So thank you very much. When Michele contacted me, said we would like you to join us. We have a very good speaker. I said, what's the name? He said, the Vicky Pryce. I said, the Vicky Pryce? He said, the Vicky Pryce. I said, of course. He said, do you want to know the time? I said, no, I'm very happy to be with the Vicky Pryce anytime. So Vicky Pryce, you are highly respected economist, intellectual, and we are delighted to have you with us on behalf of Michele and I. And really, without further ado, the floor is yours. We are here all to listen to you. And I have few comments probably after you finish your talk. Over to you, please.
Thank you. All I can say is that I'm very, very worried I might let you all down because you've suddenly built me up. So I'm just an economist, and I used to indeed, as was said earlier by Carlotta, work for an oil company. Although in my most recent incarnations, except for the last few years, I worked for the government. And the department I worked in was also responsible for quite some time for energy policy in the UK. And that was before we got terribly excited about climate change, but I was incredibly lucky in that I worked with Nick Stern, who then is now Lord Stern, who produced the first climate change review that the UK had done. And that was when, you know, although scientists had been saying for quite some time that this was an issue, it was the first time that the costs of calculating the impact of climate change on the economy was done. And it suddenly woke people up that this was a serious issue. Plus, of course, the need to do something as quickly as possible because the costs would increase later. And that was, of course, despite the fact, and as economists, we know well about what time preference is all about. You don't want to be spending any money now. You want to wait and spend it a little bit later when you're bound to be richer. But also we value £1, €1, whatever, spend now a lot more than anything we might be saving up and spending later. So what he did do, for those of you who looked carefully at the calculations that he did to come to the conclusion that actually the benefits were such that we needed to spend now, was reduce that discount rate, quite significantly, and use a discount rate which was, if you like, aimed to reduce that time preference, so that people really wanted to spend, in his assumptions, now, and that it was an important issue that needed to be tackled now. He was attacked by loads of people about this, and indeed at the end the discount rate was raised a little bit, but nevertheless it stood the test of time in the sense that it did get people to sit up and listen, and it has started all sorts of events happening after that, by which I mean the UK certainly having a committee for climate change, finally also having climate or net zero budgets, if you like, which we have to meet and get tested on. And the interesting thing, since I'm talking now from the position of the UK having left the EU, they have all survived post-Brexit. And if anything, the concern about climate change has intensified. As you know, the UK was also chairing COP26, which happened in Scotland, and quite a lot of positive things came out of it. But of course, at the end of the day, it's acting that matters, and dealing with issues that matter. And in some ways, therefore, you just wonder whether having left the EU has made it easier or more difficult for the UK to move in the right direction. And it is worth always comparing where we are in the UK to where the EU is. In fact, the EU has made huge steps, or taken huge steps forward in environmental issues and in climate change issues. And we often forget that in the UK. We think we invented everything, but of course, a lot of it we influenced while we were part of the EU, and things moved forward quite rapidly in terms of regulation, which affected emissions of cars, for example, and then the move, very substantial subsidies that we were involved in here, in terms of wind and up to a point solar as well, and the improvements have been great. I think energy efficiency in particular, and I'm trying here desperately to look at some data that I had with me, and I'll tell you about them in a minute, about how they've actually improved. The interesting thing is that, since 1990, domestic sector per households spending or energy consumption, spending on energy, if you like, has come down very significantly between 1990 and 2020. But of course, it's sort of plateaued in the last few years, and that's the real problem. There had been quite a substantial improvement, but then it plateaued. We had quite a lot of improvement as well in the industrial sector. So if you look at where we were, let's put it at 100 in 1990, the industrial sector, so the energy intensity, if you like, per unit of output had moved from 100 to just about 60. So there was a, when calculated in the right way, 40% roughly reduction in energy intensity. The one area also which we had very active involvement in because of the regulations that I mentioned has been road passenger transport per passenger kilometer. Again, people say, well, we haven't really made such huge changes, but of course, one of the reasons is that we drive more. But per passenger kilometer, again, there's been a very substantial improvement, about 20%. The area where it really hasn't things haven't moved very well, is road freight transport, which is interesting because that is the one area where we're now talking, of course, about hydrogen and so on being used for trucks. And also, frankly, when you look at the UK, it's buildings, which are going to need huge amount of spending to ensure that we save on energy there. And we do have one of the oldest housing stock in the world. And yet, even there, you see a certain improvement that has taken place over the period since 1990. And there are now very ambitious plans ahead, but the EU's ambitions seem to be possibly even greater. And there are some issues coming up with that. Now, I want to link it back to the security. I mean, it's all great. We now have a new climate change or net zero strategy that we have developed. It has sort of a 12-point plan. It sort of looks at issues such as making sure that the biggest polluters pay most for the transition, which we now realize is going to be very expensive. But at the same time, working with businesses in order to improve efficiency, which, as I said, has already happened to quite a considerable extent, but it can be done a lot more. Loads of talk about the circular economy and so on. Now, the interesting thing behind it, and what it reminds me of when we're looking at what's going on right now with Russia, is that the security issue, I mean, we talk about the actual emissions, and of course we worry about what would happen to the climate if we don't restrain the increase in temperatures. But what the Russia issue has really shown is that, yes, we can talk about all this, and we have these plans, all these, the ways in which the consumer, through the electricity bills in the UK and in other countries, is paying for this, the subsidies for renewables, and renewables indeed are very significantly overtaking, they haven't quite done that yet, but overtaking fossil fuels in terms of the percentage that we use, certainly for electricity. But we haven't really managed to make a big dent in terms of the overall energy consumption. About 70% of energy consumption is based on oil and gas right now in the UK. And if you look at what happens in quite a large part of Europe, there are countries there that also depend very crucially on gas imports from Russia. And the worrying thing is, maybe we have forgotten about security as we were going towards this net zero, because yes, if we have wind in the country, it isn't always very windy. We can do sort of reasonably well. There are loads of times when that isn't the case. And then we need to go back to depending on even coal-fired power stations and certainly gas. And what has now been realized is that we had not invested sufficiently in gas ourselves in order to make sure that during the transition period, we at least had a less polluting, but also less expensive source of power, still fossil fuel based, but in fact, itself allowing for that transition to happen without too much pollution, but also without really upsetting our overall security of supply. Because obviously, if we don't have enough gas here and the wind doesn't blow, we have to import it. The UK imported mostly, when it has to, from Norway. So we depend less on Russia than is the case elsewhere in Europe. So for example, the reason why there is all this concern right now about whether one should take Russia out of the SWIFT payment system is because, of course, if they don't get paid for the oil or the gas, particularly, then we can't have it in Europe. And I think Italy depends 46% on gas from Russia. Germany depends a lot on it too. Yes, France doesn't because it has nuclear. But what you've got therefore is that division between countries. And the way that they looked at security would now have been intensified very considerably. But I do remember the point I was trying to make before, when I worked for the government, we had energy as part of us, and we were looking at encouraging once again, a slightly bigger expansion of nuclear, because obviously in terms of the mix, all the old nuclear stations, power stations were going to be decommissioned pretty soon, and we needed to have a reasonable mix. What we found going out and talking to people is that they were quite against nuclear at the time. But if you then said, yes, but what about security of energy as a result, they would then completely switch from being negative to being positive. And we see that now. This security issue, which was very well explained earlier, is going to be uppermost in people's minds. And it might affect, in some ways, the path to net zero might just become a little bit different than what we had anticipated would be the case before. But also what you see in Europe is that, of course, there is the Fit for 55 policy for climate action, with all sorts of intentions of how to ensure that we move to net zero, with a lot of money which is intended to be spent. I mean, we hear that what we need between now and 2030 is 350 billion being spent a year in the EU, which is quite enormous. It's what do you count as renewable? What do you count as green? And that, of course, also affects the companies you support through the stock market, whether your investments are perceived to be bona fide green rather than greenwashing, as people are worried about. And of course, what is going on right now in the EU is that they have decided to extend, I think lots and lots of environmentalists don't like that, but to extend what they term green, in inverted commas, to include nuclear and gas. And I think those two reasons are there. A, because there's two energy sources, if you like. A, because it's very, very hard. The transition is going to be very, very costly if you don't include those. And of course, it's very important for France in particular, which is mostly reliant on nuclear. Very important for Germany, which has been reliant on gas. Let's see what happens from here on. So this new taxonomy has accepted both. And loads of environmentalists think, and climate change experts, that there's a bit of cheating going on right now. Well, the UK has already announced itself that, despite what the IEA had said, which is don't invest in any new gas and oil fields, said actually we do need to invest in gas. And we're going to be needing to invest in gas for some time to come. So we have, therefore, a shift that has taken place. So the UK has not been very dissimilar post-Brexit in terms of how it's moving forward and how it's rethinking various issues. But I think what has happened is that everyone is now much more conscious, first, of the cost of transition, which maybe even in the Stern Review we underestimated. And second, about the importance of security, which had perhaps become a little bit less obvious in terms of policy objectives than you would have expected would have been the case. And indeed, unfortunately, just to finish off, the UK had one of the lowest gas storage facilities than any of the other countries, in the main countries in Europe, and which has been one of the reasons why our prices have been, in fact, more volatile, if you like, over the last few months, when they started increasing quite significantly, than has been the case in Europe. So, so post-Brexit, therefore, to sum up, our policies are not very dissimilar. Nuclear, we're building more. Gas, we'll have more. EDF is very involved with us in this. And I think it's a combination of climate change and security, but I think security issues are coming up a lot more because, of course, for the moment, we haven't quite sorted out how to store renewable energy to use at any point when the wind isn't actually blowing, or when the sun isn't shining, which is very often the case, I'm sorry to have to say, in the UK. Okay, I'll stop here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vicky Pryce. Can I, if I may, ask you just one question till other people maybe try to prepare themselves? What is the justification for Britain to have a very low storage in gas? I mean, how wide is that? Why, you know?
I'm afraid it was a bit of a mistake. It was the decision to close some storage facilities in 2017 by Centrica, which is a big gas company, was because it was quite costly to keep it and prices were very low anyway, so it wasn't economical. So the government allowed that to happen. It was, you know, private sector is running our energy industry. So I'm afraid this is what happened. And now we realize, I think everyone has realized, I hope, that this was a bit of a mistake.
So it is, I mean, it is realized in the corridors of power. It's a mistake and they are doing things about it.
It's a very good question about doing things about it. I mean, you have to encourage private sector companies to do something about it, but of course you have to also look at the North Sea and see whether those places where gas was being stored can be used again. So there's quite a lot of work that will need to be done for this to happen. So it is a problem, and we may not be able to overcome it easily.
Okay, thank you. The other point, if I may, I mean, you mentioned the Glasgow conference, the COPs 20, and one of the problem there is, for example, they put a target for in 50 years time we will do this. I mean, we live in a time where businesses, where societies, where even families, they just only plan for the next maximum for the next month. And anyone just tell me, well, my plan in 50 years time, I shut down on him or her. So I hope you see where is the cynicism coming from. So why can't we have, okay, 50 years target with every year a 1 year target, and so we can measure whether how serious we are or not? Or is that not realistic suggestion?
I think it's quite a realistic suggestion. It should be both the 50-year and the 1 year. But the point I was making earlier about the time preference of people is exactly what you just sort of showed a little bit more graphically, if you like. So you're absolutely right. People could switch off, but it isn't really going to be by just persuading everybody to cycle or use a bit less plastic. The difference that will make, or eat less meat might make a difference, but not a huge amount of difference unless everybody does it across the world, if you like. Suddenly we have no cows any longer or whatever. But what you need, I'm afraid, is an awful lot of investment. So you need to convince people, companies to invest, since I spoke earlier about Centrica and their storage issues in the UK. But that investment will only happen under certain conditions. First of all, you have to have some carrots and sticks. So perhaps you're not going to be using various companies for your, in your procurement process. They won't be able to bid, they won't be able to construct whatever it is that you're trying to build if they haven't moved in a certain direction themselves and invest in a certain direction, like perhaps build a new home so they build in a better way and insulate them, which of course is quite expensive. And the carrots are, yes, we're going to use you if you do the right things. And then, of course, what you can also do, which various governments have done, is basically subsidize what is done. A lot of what the consumer pays on a regular basis, and of course it's going up in terms of the overall cost, pays as a percentage of whatever they're paying on their electricity bills. Goes, and gas bills actually, goes to renewable areas. So it's used to subsidize, and has been used to subsidize very effectively, wind and solar. It's basically what's been going on. And also on nuclear, I think the UK has been a bit exceptional in this. We have offered very good price at the end of the day through a formula that is in favor of EDF. For the electricity that's produced by the new power station, for example, which is happening now, of course, and we have more or less guaranteed some of the costs of building this power station, which is of course very expensive. So that's another way of doing it. So we as taxpayers, we may not care about the long term, but we are made to pay now for this to be achieved in the future. It wouldn't happen otherwise. I don't think you'd get people to come out of their houses and just offer you whatever it is, this percentage of their income just like that in order to think about 50 years time. And of course, the economists will tell you that we're going to be richer and there will be more technology and we'll all be possibly sorted out if we just invest in technology, which is the third thing. So a lot of risk sharing, I think, needs to take place between governments and companies, which I think is beginning to happen. And after all, there you are in the EU. The UK was actually the first to issue a green bond. So it's raising money to use in a certain way and hoping to have similar money being raised by private companies. And there is a lot of money around. The ESG market has increased hugely, and a lot of it is on green. I don't think people really pay enough attention, although they should, to governance and social issues under ESG, but certainly green, which has served them well. So there is a lot of money which is being invested. So that's how it will happen. Innovation, investment, regulation, incentives, subsidies, a mix of those.
Thank you very much. Carlotta, what do you have in your portfolios of questions?
Yes, I see some of us are already asking questions, so I will start from the first one. Duncan, he's asking, do you see the current events leading to changes in UK government policy on fracking?
Very good question. There is a big push to open it up again, because of course the decision had been done on environmental grounds and local grounds actually as well. A lot of opposition to sort of stop it after some experiments at the beginning, because there were some earthquakes that were felt. So it didn't happen. So now there is indeed a new push. Now, of course, I mean, the interesting thing is if you look at sort of shale gas and oil and so on, you need to keep prices at quite a high level to make it economically attractive. And that's what we saw in the US. When prices were low, which they had been low for some time, they just stopped. I mean, loads of bankruptcies and so on. And I don't think the amount that the UK would produce through fracking would make very significant difference. But it is a hot topic right now.
Thank you very much. And there is another very good question. I second to that. I actually wanted to ask something similar. Ricardo, from the energy security team as well. He's asking, since the current crisis in Ukraine is demonstrating that energy is highly politicized, or at least is subject to political interest and moves in general, the European Union would like to disentangle itself from Russian supplies, but at the same time, it has little room to move forward for the reasons that have been mentioned before. So one of the ideas and realized solution is increasing the import of the American LNG, the liquefied natural gas. And according to you, what will be the cost and the benefits of such a move? And is it a feasible solution?
The first thing to say is that we've already seen some of that happening. So LNG has been coming to Europe, and also a lot of LNG that was aimed to go to Asia has been re-diverted to Europe because the prices have been so high here. It really made an awful lot of sense. But you need the terminals, you need the LNG terminals, and they need to be constructed, and we don't have enough in Europe. It's not impossible, but we don't have enough. And that's basically what is happening right now, that we are going to rely a lot more on LNG, but we need also to be able to do something with the LNG when it arrives, because of course you need to reconvert it into proper gas, if you like, which we don't have enough facility to do at present. So it's going to take a little bit of time. It's not an instantaneous answer, but the fact that we have had more LNG directed to Europe has helped. Now, of course, with Ukraine, all bids are off. Who knows where we'll be? But that was certainly the way things were moving.
Thank you so much. Another question from Chris. I am slightly cynical about energy efficiency as it doesn't look at this at the whole life carbon impact. I live in a house that is about 300 years old. I will never meet energy efficiency targets, partly because we are not in mains gas, so have to have heating oil. But it would not make sense to knock the house down to build a more energy efficient house because there will be a serious carbon impact of knocking down and construction. But in the future, I might get penalized, which means taxed, because my house isn't energy efficient. So how do you comment this?
Well, what I can say is this is such a good point. I mean, what has been tried in the UK is to partly subsidize insulation in homes. Yes, okay, 300. I mean, I live in a house that was built in 1827, so it's not as old as the one we just heard about. So it will be 200 years old soon. And indeed, you're quite right. I am right now wearing, I don't know how many jumpers because it's quite cold. And it is expensive to do. So the calculations have been, although some people question it, because I do quite a lot of debates with environmentalists who seem to think it's actually, we've exaggerated the figures. But it's anywhere between 75 billion and 300 billion pounds to, depending on who you listen to insulate the 20 odd million houses we've got at present that really need a lot of attention. And we do have very old housing stock, which I think I mentioned before. Well, we've tried it a few times and it's been a complete disaster. Just going back to the point made earlier about the time preference, you know, absolutely, people weren't interested in terms of paying something now that might save them £50 or whatever. If it did, over, you know, every year, over a period of years, they thought that we weren't going to be here. But yes, you're right about possibly being penalized. But our expectation generally is that there will be a bit of recognition of needing perhaps a better subsidy system in order for this to happen, which won't happen otherwise. And new houses at least will be slightly better, one hopes. But just to say that the similar problem, and you're right to be slightly cynical, exists with electric cars, of course. Now, if we were to just stop using our cars, petrol or diesel cars now, and just build loads of EVs, then that would be terrible for the environment, because it would, you know, first of all, you destroy all whatever you had there, and then you have to build all these new cars. It'd be impossible to justify it. So we have the same problem, doing things gently and really, you know, I think we probably are beginning to think of penalizing all the people who have cars as of 2030, certainly in this country, but I think Germany slightly later, when you're not going to be allowed to produce any more diesel or petrol cars from that moment on. It's going to make life quite expensive unless technology really changes so substantially, or there is huge amount of subsidies for electric vehicles. So it's a similar point. And you're right, to build a new house out of where you are now makes no sense on the environment, and you shouldn't be penalized. I mean, obviously different countries do different things, and one expects that some sense will be seen eventually. But I mean, sorry, one hopes is what I meant, that a sensible solution will be found to not penalize you so much. So I'm sorry you have this problem, but I feel it in my bone, if you like, right this minute in this old house I'm in.
Excellent. Do we have more, Carlota?
Yes, we have two more. One from Miguel, another member of the energy security team. He's asking, how would the potential unification of the European Union energy market interplay with the European Union ETS, which is the emission trading system?
Well, I mean, the European ETS, the European trading system, has, I mean, you could argue that it had let us down for years because the carbon price was so low, and there were, of course, all these free permits given. and it didn't really have a major impact moving us in the right direction. Well, now, of course, you see carbon prices already gone up very significantly. You've seen many more sectors being affected. But it's an interesting question you ask about integrating. I mean, one of the things that the UK will be missing out is indeed this integration of the energy markets that is supposed to be happening, which of course makes a huge amount of sense. But one of the things that will be standing out as a bit of a complication is this whole system of a possible carbon border adjustment mechanism, which is being recommended. So that, of course, will mean that quite a lot of the imports that may have been coming before are now going to have a bigger tariff, which will be to the benefit of, obviously, it's like protectionism, to the benefit of the EU, and also, I suppose, to the benefit of the companies that are operating in the EU. So it's a bit sort of protectionist from that point of view, but I have no doubt in my mind that carbon price going up across the board in Europe has to be, you know, a good thing to reflect the actual pollution that is being caused, and that the carbon permits that are traded do their job. I think that then it gets quite complicated once you start having this border adjustment mechanism in terms of where the real price for carbon should be, or should we just be going for a carbon price which is global? Because we have our own little ETS system without the E, if you like. Well, no, it is an emission trading scheme, but it's not an EU emission trading scheme. We have one which is a UK one, which is trying to be as close as possible with the EU one. But then you get all these markets doing different things, and I think that's pretty bad. So that is the point I think I would make on this. But if you want to come back with some more specific that perhaps I haven't answered, then please do.
Thank you. Do we have another question?
Yes, the chat is actually on fire. It's a topic that is triggering interest. So another question from Omri from the Middle East team. And it's a good question because I was reading today about Qatar trying to replace Russian supplies. So Omri is asking, do you assess that the major Middle East oil suppliers will be able to force the European Union and the UK to sign long-term deals, keeping oil a commodity for the foreseeable future?
Yes, they might. But of course, I mean, first of all, there's LNG. The second thing is oil more generally, and gas up to a point, but oil, where we have to depend up to a point on what happens at OPEC. As you know, OPEC had already restricted supplies during the pandemic. And then, of course, the demand came back, but they kept supplies relatively low, and then gently they've been increasing them. They haven't responded fast enough. They hadn't until now to what's been going on by offering to increase supplies. So if they do, then and they're doing, then that would be pretty good news. So there'll be a bit of diversion. And of course, the EU has been talking about discussing such issues with Qatar and others. And they made an announcement of that sort just a few days ago, last week, that they were very serious about diverting sort of sources of energy, talking particularly to Middle Eastern producers. So with a bit of luck, that may work, and we might see, therefore, prices coming down. It's interesting because when you look at what happened to oil prices, they went up very significantly, and gas prices the first day of the invasion, and then they came down a bit. And frankly, if you leave prices at the level they're at now, which is quite high, below 100 or 90, whatever it was, 93, I think, maybe between 91 and 93 earlier today, it's pretty bad for the world economy. So it isn't in the interest of anyone, except, of course, you know, if Russia still sells it, it can, you know, do quite well out of, you know, getting a lot, you know, more money. And for the moment, the interesting thing is, from what I understand, gas has been flowing from Russia in bigger quantities the last few days, which is interesting in itself. Perhaps they just need the money to finance whatever it is that they're up to. So yes, I think that would be good news, and I think it is possible that that will work, and there can be perhaps a better relationship. But of course, it has to be long term, because we're talking about energy security. Do you remember supplies from Russia were also long term, and I think Russia had kept to its contracts. It's really when you need a bit more as we had done recently, because of this very substantial growth in demand as we came out of the pandemic, when Russia didn't quite didn't respond as the West would have liked them to do. So it is really in those points. Long-term contracts are great, but we've got to have the flexibility when things tighten to be assured that we get the extra that's needed.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Elena, would you like to jump in with a question? I see you want to ask something.
Yeah, sure. So my question was more related to Italy, my country. So today, relating to the sanctions, our Premier Mario Draghi talked about the possibility of reopening centrals and implants of carbon to ensure energy supply in Italy. And so since we also talked about energy transition and sanctions, I wonder how, for example, this speech by Draghi can be an example of how sanctions can clash with energy transition, because of course reopening carbon centers would be definitely a move backwards when it comes to energy transition.
You're absolutely right, but one has to be realistic. At times here in the UK, when the wind has been blowing, we've been using coal-fired power station input into our electricity and energy more generally. They've been doing it in Germany, where of course their transition is an even more difficult one because they said no more nuclear, so they have had to rely on coal. You talked about Italy. I originally come from Greece. We were supposed, well, we made an announcement a little while ago, the Prime Minister of Greece, Mitsotakis, that we're going to be moving out of lignite, which has been a very major source for us as an input to energy, and that may well have to be stopped for a little while, I suppose. I think one has to be realistic. One does want, of course, to get to the point you want, but if you make it so incredibly expensive that when the economies don't work, then perhaps you can move there much faster. Now that I come to think of it, maybe that's the idea. Just stop producing any energy or anything, and then perhaps the economies will collapse, and we're not going to have that terrible climate change point that we all worry about. But that's very unrealistic. I think Draghi, if anything, from anything we know about him, he did such a brilliant job at the ECB, is that he's a pragmatist, and probably what he says, makes sense. You can't be held hostage, if you like, to providers of energy, which can completely and utterly ruin your economy. So we may have to just delay things a little bit, just to the point we were making earlier. Do we have interesting, really, because what would have happened to our yearly targets if we had a yearly target? And we have this problem now with the Ukraine. I mean, it would have gone out of the window. So maybe it is better to have longer term targets. Maybe we could come back to it when the economies do better and you get back to reasonable growth and prices sort of come down. But of course, low prices before encouraged a lot of use of gas and others. So some renewables had to fight against it, really, because of course prices were so low of everything. It was extraordinary. So it was a bit of a hard job anyway at that time. So I think realism is absolutely the name of the game right now, and security is important. You can't have whole parts of Italy with no electricity, for example, or your companies not being able to produce.
If I may ask you a question from something you just mentioned. Germany decision to stop the nuclear power stations, was it a scientific decision or a political decision?
Well, as you know, it was after the explosion in Japan. It was a political concern that which gripped the nation, if you like, that nuclear wasn't really very safe. And I think that was the reason for it. And it was pretty soon after that the announcement was made. Now, of course, there are still nuclear plants operating, so they haven't stopped. And they're carrying on. And of course, all sorts of other things Germany has said, particularly on coal, and yet it's carrying on. Coal coal shouldn't have been used by now, but it still is in Germany, sort of extended by I don't know how many decades, in fact, from the initial targets. So I think it was political, in my view. On the economic front, though, I have to say, like here in the UK, before this or these increases in prices, the cost that we'd have to pay, we're already beginning to pay through our electricity bills just to get the nuclear power station built. And now we're talking about having some more. And of course, to pay for the price that we had more or less, guaranteed to EDF. It was very, very costly for individuals. So, and of course, what it doesn't take into account, and now we're finding it out, is that the decommissioning is really expensive, more expensive perhaps than we had thought. So if you put all that in it, the lifetime costs or whatever it is, whatever is an expression, it may be considerably greater than what we have assumed at present. So there could well be also an economic argument against it.
Thank you. Carlotta, the last question, if you have.
Yeah, there are many, but I think we are able only to take one more. Vicky, we will keep you here for the whole evening, but unfortunately we need to cut a bit. So the last question is from Julia. She's writing, energy consumption is the blood of society's operation in terms of house and production functioning. What would you suggest to mitigate the impact of energy depletion to women in Europe that are supporting the baseline of social functionality in the midst of this crisis? Very good question.
So do you mean the women at home or the women in various jobs, or?
I'm not sure. Julia, do you want to step in?
Oh, yes. Well, the support of society is women taking care of children, taking care of older people, working in the caregiving industry, in hospitals, and also in the small production. So how could we assure what option is possible? Because when the lines from the energy coming from Russia and Ukraine are closed or diminished or whatever in the middle of the political crisis, what are we going to do with them?
Well, I'm afraid you need to subsidize their expenditure on energy quite considerably. So the UK here has already acknowledged that this is something that needs to be done, with extra money going to households, particularly those below a certain income level. But also you've seen that in across the EU. So in France, the increase is only 4%, as I understand it, between until the end of 2022. Whereas here it's already been 58% and rising. So in Greece has been 45%, I think, or maybe 53% actually in Greece. So yes, individuals are suffering quite considerably in places where that subsidy hasn't been given. And I think that is going to be a serious problem, because I think your point is absolutely correct, that women who work a lot in supporting society and they work in care sectors, and they tend to be at the lower end of the pay scale, and they're the ones, of course, who spend a bigger percentage of their income on the essentials, including, of course, on energy, electricity, gas, and so on. So that's a serious problem, and it is one that needs to be addressed. And I don't think that it's understood completely, because the fabric of society could be affected. And it's interesting. Just one point to make is that the World Economic Forum that met virtually, did a survey of all the experts that were involved there, and decided that, in fact, one of the main worries that they had was the breakdown of social cohesion, which I think goes to your point. And I was very surprised to see that there. That was mainly European participants that responded. There were some US, but mainly European, and they were really worried about that. They had climate change up the top, not the pandemic. The pandemic was a bit down, but social cohesion was straight up there. I mean, it was, and they worried about all sorts of things, higher inflation, which is affecting, quite bits of society that we really need to worry about, and so on. And I thought that's good, because they're really worried about it. And then I read the details of it, which is good. I mean, we park that, it's fantastic. The UK participants, I'm sorry to have to say, although it just suggests that maybe they're on top of their businesses, which is interesting, was cybersecurity. And we got to bear this in mind, because even in energy, we're now moving to smart meters and everything else. A lot more artificial intelligence, a lot more tech. And a lot of stuff could be very easily disrupted through cybersecurity. And the reason why the Brits were particularly concerned is because they have had one of the worst cases of cybersecurity attacks in Europe, the highest, apart, and the US comes first, then the UK, because of the financial system. But it can do terrible things to the energy market as well. So we talked earlier about single energy market, what we do, and all these technological things that will be developing. I think the Brits were right to worry about it. Doesn't mean that he didn't care about the other things, but they put cybersecurity right to the top. And for the energy market, it matters hugely. If you can sort of take out an entire energy network, it's going to be a bit of a problem. And indeed, all the people you're worried about would be worst affected. Of course, industry as well. But it is something that needs a lot more attention. And I was reading an article just today where, because of the Ukraine issue, concerns about cybersecurity have now zoomed up in people's agenda just today.
Okay, Dr. Vicky Pryce, on behalf of ITSS, Michele, Hume, and our friends and associates with us this evening, we would like really to thank you for such I mean, as Coretta said, we could have stayed another 5 hours. I have at least 100 more questions, by the way, for you. But we need to be reasonable with you and civilized, and to keep encouraging you to accept Michele's invitation. So thank you very much. As always, you are wonderful. And
thank you.
I don't need to watch Newsnight, because I know I watch it sometimes only because of you. So I don't need to watch.
Thank you.
So we are grateful, and on behalf of all of us, thank you again, and hope to see you very, very soon. Thank you.
And also on behalf of Michele, because again, he's sick at home and he cannot really speak at the moment. So just on behalf of Michele, he really would like to thank both of you. Mohammed as well for being here, and to the Hume Institute, and to you, Vicky. It has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for asking me. And if we did carry on for another 5 hours, I would have ended up like Michele, because my voice is indeed going as well. So thank you for being kind. So thanks very much, and really, really great. This security issue is such an important aspect, and I'm glad I participated in this. Thank you. Everything I heard was really interesting as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, everybody, especially Dr. Pryce. Excellent. And really, security has many angles.
No, you're right. Well, thank you very much. Yes, to be continued, of course, because it's going to be with us for some time. So thank you. So I'll say goodbye, and very kind of you. And Michele, we'll talk soon when you can. Okay. Bye-bye. Bye, Mohammed. Bye, Lena. Bye, Carlotta. And everyone, and Julia, and everyone else who spoke. Bye-bye.
Bye.